Anyway, I just want to thank Paul for inviting me, and I want to thank Paul for being one of the great conservative leaders in the state of New Jersey. We desperately need people like Paul that energize me to do what I'm doing, and I'll make a shameless plug that a few weeks ago I announced my candidacy for the United States Senate. So, let me just quickly tell something about Ron Paul, who I've known for 25 years. And we've communicated back and forth on a whole bunch of issues. And when I ran for governor in the U.S. Senate, he gave me a lot of good insight about my campaign. But I'm not here to talk about the past, I'm talking about the future. And the reason I'm supporting Congressman Ron Paul is that he is the real, authentic Republican in this race. He's been in Congress for 10 terms. February 1st, he'll be married for 51 years to his lovely wife, Carol. They have 5 children, 18 grandchildren. 3 of his children are physicians. And he's an obstetrician who's delivered 4,000 babies. That's a little bit about his background and who he is. And he was one of 4 people in 1976 to endorse Ronald Reagan. When people said Reagan was unelectable, he was a fringe candidate, he was an extremist, he was out of touch with reality. But Ron Paul saw in Ronald Reagan something that people voted for in 1980, a leader of conservative values. Well, here we are in New Jersey. February 5th is Super Tuesday, and we have a primary where we have only 4 candidates left, and Ron Paul is one of them. Who would have ever thought 6 months ago he'd be one of the candidates left? Well, who is Ron Paul in terms of issues? Well, let's talk about where we are. We're in an unpopular war. 71% of New Jerseyans are not in favor of this war any longer. And the vast majority of Americans are in the same position. We're facing the real possibility of a lengthy recession. The Republicans got slaughtered in 2006 because of runaway spending, ethical lapses, and just being insensitive to what's going on in the nation. And so we're now at a crossroads for the Republican Party and the nation. And so the question is, who is best to lead this Republican Party and the nation for the next 4 to 8 years? Well, let's look at Ron Paul's record. He's never restricted the First Amendment, unlike McCain-Feingold, which people across the political spectrum have said is a dagger in the heart of the First Amendment. So my question, or my statement to voters are, if you're willing to compromise on the First Amendment for expediency purposes, what other amendments are you willing to compromise for in the name of expediency? In other words, the Bill of Rights are not negotiable, folks. They're there to protect us against the government. And Ron Paul has never wavered on the First Amendment, on the Fourth Amendment, on the Second Amendment, and on the Ninth and Tenth Amendment. In other words, if it's not in the Constitution, it's reserved to the states and the people. He's one of the few people in the Congress that's never voted to violate his oath of office regarding the Constitution. And people say, well, if I'm president, I'm going to appoint strict constructionists to the Supreme Court. Well, Ron Paul is a strict constructionist. It takes one to nominate one. So Ron Paul knows what the Constitution is all about. It's about limiting the role of government in our lives. Now, what about his foreign policy, which is not in tune to the majority of apparently Republican voters? Maybe not, because there are Republican voters who tell me they're not in favor of this policy as well. Well, Ron Paul was in favor of Bush's policy in 2000, which was no nation building, a humble foreign policy. And if we go to war, there has to be 3 criteria. It has to be in our country's vital interest. There has to be a clearly defined mission, and there has to be an exit strategy. So based upon George Bush's criteria for 2000, we failed. But we haven't failed. Saddam Hussein is dead, his sons are dead, the military command is either in jail or dead. So we won. We're not losing in Iraq, we won. Given the criteria of what our mission was, we won in Iraq. So the question is, who best understands not only foreign policy, but domestic policy? Who's the person who wants to get rid of the income tax and replace it with nothing, and downsize the federal government by $1 trillion, from $3 trillion to $2 trillion, which would be the same budget we had 10 years ago. We were all happy 10 years ago with the $2 trillion budget. Let's go back to that, Ron says. So let's get rid of the Department of Education, which was a standard platform of the Republican Party. Get rid of the Department of Education instead of expanding it like we have the last 8 years. Let's get rid of the Commerce Department. Let's get rid of the Energy Department. It doesn't produce any energy. Let's get rid of that HUD. That doesn't produce any housing. In other words, let's have a president who understands the limit of government power and have a free society based upon the the principles of the Founding Fathers. That's what Ron Paul offers, and guess what? They don't like it. They don't like liberty. They don't like freedom. Well, if you don't like liberty and freedom, why are we Americans? That's the principles we were founded on. Ron Paul is giving us the spirit of '76, and for some reason, he's been criticized for that position, which I find incomprehensible. So if you're going to criticize the spirit of '76 in the platform of Ron Paul, where are we headed as a society? More collectivism. That's the future if we don't elect Ron Paul as president. Thank you very much.